Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It is Outside the Box. We're going to be with you live for the next hour. I'm your host, Alex Ansary. It is June 19th, 2011, and we have a very special broadcast planned for you this evening. Michael Tellinger is our guest. He's actually been on the show several times. This is his third appearance on the show. He's on the show tonight because he's coming to Portland, Oregon on the 24th of June. And for those that didn't see the previous episodes of Outside the Box featuring Michael, he talks about a lot of very interesting things about the true origins, as he understands it, true origins of humankind, our species. Now, for 30 years, he's been fascinated by the very nature of reality and the cosmos. He's authored several books. Slave Species of God is one of them. He's also written Adam's Calendar, and the book that I have before me tonight, which we're actually going to be showing you some pictures of, is Temples of the African Gods. Michael Tellinger lives in South Africa, and as an archaeologist, he's been looking at the ancient ruins of South Africa. Most people are mostly familiar with Egypt, for example, but Michael Tellinger has been presenting a new level of information to the people of planet Earth. And so it's my pleasure to welcome Michael to Portland and have him back on the show. How are you doing tonight?
Excellent, Alex. Lovely to be talking to you again, and I must tell you, I'm really looking forward to getting up to Portland this coming week.
Well, I was looking at your website the other day, and it looks like you've been touring the United States again. You've been speaking just about every other night, sometimes every night, in California, Texas, New Mexico, and I believe you're in Utah right now?
Yeah, we're just stopping over on our way from Salt Lake City up to Oregon, and yeah, we started out this tour. You know, last year we did 26 cities in the USA, and we thought, okay, that was big. You know, let's not do that again. And this year it got away with us, and we thought instead of scaling it down, somehow it shot up to 30 cities, including 3 in Canada. So we got to cap it somewhere, but the interest is just so amazing and mind-blowing and growing so rapidly in the United States and also in Canada that it's very difficult to keep a lid on it, you know. So
tell us a little bit about what you're going to be talking about, the lecture coming up in Portland on the 24th.
All right. The lecture in Portland is my latest presentation. It's an upgrade from last year with a lot of new information. And it really deals with the origins of humankind, the new evidence found and presented, scientific evidence. Who are we? Where do we come from? Why are we here? Why is it that we can't answer those 3 simple questions? It deals with providing physical evidence of lost and vanished civilizations in South Africa and in Southern Africa as a whole. And we're talking about a very large vanished civilization that were mining gold. It brings in, obviously, all areas of science and research, which includes history, it includes archaeology, it includes astronomy and archaeoastronomy, it includes physics and science and chemistry, and also then metaphysics and the new areas of research and the frontiers of science that very few people are aware of actually exist. And I guess to many people, when you start talking about the real frontiers of research and science, to many people that sounds like black magic and hocus pocus, but that's not what it is. It's real stuff that's going on in research laboratories. So it's very exciting.
Well, let's recap and go back to the beginning. And we are, of course, looking at the work of Zecharia Sitchin and others. We have some slides we're going to share with the audience at this point that have been taken from the Sumerian tablets. And Michael, in the last decade, we've seen a massive increase in interest in these tablets. For years, many people have been locked in the box of viewing our real human origins as being the result of Darwinism or creationism under the umbrella in the matrix of what's being told in religion. But as many people now know, and even the History Channel is talking about these parallels between the Old Testament in the story of creation, and of course the Sumerian texts, and I believe the Sumerian translation for the first man is Adamu. And so take us back to the beginning, Michael, where all this begins.
You can call me Adam, it's okay. Yeah, look, the important thing for people to realize is that everything we know today in areas of science, in areas of astronomy, and not in science, let me rephrase that. The foundation of our knowledge today comes to us from the Sumerians, and that covers all the subjects, from astronomy, mathematics, medicine, the legal system, monetary system and accounting, architecture, agriculture. The Sumerians were the first people to embrace the art of writing and write down all their knowledge on millions of clay tablets, referred to as the Sumerian clay tablets. So it is, at the moment, the oldest written record of human history. And from these tablets, we get some fascinating information. The biggest proponent and researcher in this field, by a long shot, was Zecharia Sitchin, who wrote, I think, about 13 or 14 books on the subject, who was a master at translating and decoding the Sumerian text, the cuneiform text, and had a keen understanding of what it meant, what the guys are actually telling us. The important thing is that while Zecharia Sitchin has come under a lot of flack and a lot of criticism by various sources, one needs to be very careful how, when you start attacking people that have devoted their entire life to a specific field, because what we sometimes think as misleading is just a different interpretation. And I think that's really what it comes down to. It seems to me that many people have a problem with Zecharia Sitchin's interpretation. However, what I can tell you with absolute certainty, that I have more confidence in his interpretations than anything else I've read, especially the thousands of pages you read on the Oxford University's website, thousands and thousands of translations of Sumerian tablets that present everything the Sumerians wrote on clay tablets as a work of fiction. Now, I have a huge problem with that, and I'm sure you understand why. So let's come back to Zecharia Sitchin. Now, I'm fortunate enough to be able to get this level of confidence in his work because I have found the physical evidence of what Sitchin has been writing about and talking about for his whole life. And this evidence is this vast civilization that lived at the southern tip of Africa, mining gold. We have the physical evidence of millions of stone structures that were left behind and deserted. We have millions of gold mines and many other fascinating archaeological and geological sites that just boggle the mind.
And I've only found out about this through you, Michael, just several years ago. Like I said before, the History Channel and others, there's a big focus on Egypt, but you point out that there is another connection. In your book, you also talk about the, I believe it's the 31st parallel that connects. What are we looking at here with this lineup of several ancient cities?
Well, it's 31 degrees east longitudinal line that connects what we now call, or what I call, Enki's calendar, and there's a whole lot of reasons for that. I go into those in my presentation. So if I'm skipping over some of these things, there's not enough time in the show, obviously, to go into detail. So just take my word for it. Come to my presentation, and you'll get a lot more detail on this. It connects Enki's calendar, otherwise known as Adam's calendar, Enki's house, which is the wonderful ruin at Great Zimbabwe, and then the Great Pyramid of Giza in Egypt. All of those aligned along the 31 degrees east longitudinal line. And there's some very important specific reasons for that. What you mentioned about the link to Egypt, all the structures and the civilizations in South Africa and in Zimbabwe, all these ancient civilizations, this vanished civilization, can be directly linked to all the so-called great civilizations in the Northern Hemisphere. The Egyptians, the Sumerians, the Romans, the Greeks, the Sumerians, the Phoenicians, and also the Hindu Dravidians, the Indus Valley civilization. All of these so-called great civilizations that we thought were the first great civilizations on earth, especially Egypt and the Sumerians, are very richly represented among the ruins and carvings of southern Africa. And this is spectacular because the petroglyphs and the carvings of some of the symbols, which includes like the Sumerian winged disc and the cross in a circle, and even the Egyptian Ankh, are carved in the rock in South Africa, but they're much older than any of these civilizations in the north, which tells us that those symbols go back more than 200,000 years in their application at the southern tip of Africa before they eventually were exported and used in the north and among the Egyptians and the others.
What is clear is that these ruins seem to be at certain places on the planet for a reason. What do you think these stones were used for?
Well, this was the big mystery. You know, what were these ruins in South Africa for? They're all circular. Everyone is completely unique. They are made of very specific stones. And what I'm telling you now is something that's taken more than 500 years to figure out. Just those three simple statements. Now, this is how incredible these breakthrough discoveries are. Because sometimes we forget to ask the very simple questions, and we try and figure out the complex answers without asking the simple questions. And the questions are, you know, what kind of stone are these stone structures made of? And when you realize that we're dealing with the same kind of stone, predominantly one type of stone, there are some other exceptions, but there are reasons for those exceptions that I've also subsequently discovered. And the reasons for this specific stone that they used is because it has very strong acoustic properties. And what I talk about in my presentation and show is that these stones ring like bells. Now, when I made that discovery, I realized that it is sound that we're dealing with, sound as a source of energy. And that takes us back very quickly and immediately to the source of creation in most, if not all, ancient civilizations that talk about the Word of God or the primordial Aum or Om, or the singing, some sort of singing that created the universe, as the Egyptians believed. You realize that most ancient cultures believe that some sort of sound or Word of God, the Word of God, that created the universe and all things in it. So sound is a primary source of energy in these ancient ruins of southern Africa. And they use sound as a source of energy for the gold mining, for the purification of the gold, for the processing, for levitation, for creating the stone circles in the specific shapes that they are. Because, as I mentioned, each one is completely unique. So that's why the type of stones and the sound frequencies are so key.
You know, when I was listening to your interview last night with George Norrie on the 14th of June, very good interview, by the way, I came across a very interesting BBC article that synchronicity, it found its way to me, actually, Michael, but the headline is, Riddle of Baghdad's Batteries. And listen, folks, this is the date for this article. It's February 27th, 2003. That's several weeks before March 19th, 2003, the date that the United States invaded Iraq. What this article talks about is very interesting. It reads that Aaron Fraud investigates what could have been the very first batteries and how these important archaeological and technological artifacts are now at risk from the impending war in Iraq. War can destroy more than a people, an army, or a leader. Culture, tradition, and history also lie in the firing line. Iraq has a rich national heritage. The Garden of Eden and the Tower of Babel are said to have been sited in this ancient land. In any war, there is a chance that priceless treasures will be lost forever. Articles such as the ancient battery that resides defenseless in the Museum of Baghdad. And this was written, again, several months before the museum was looted, which I'll get to in just a moment. But the article continues, for this object suggests that the region whose civilizations gave us writing and the will may have also invented electric cells 2,000 years before such devices were well known. And so the pictures that you see before you on the screen, these are reenactments, recreations of this Baghdad battery, and there are people that have actually put this into application and found out that it actually works. After looking at this report, I went back and looked at the other report from the BBC just several months later, and it reads from the BBC News here, looters ransack Baghdad Museum. Thousands of valuable historical items from Baghdad's main museum have been taken or destroyed by looters. Michael, when I look at these things taking place, it's like a parallel script to Indiana Jones and Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Absolutely, and I need to remind your viewers that archaeology does not have its origins in a noble profession. It does. It has emerged, and in many ways still represents, tomb robbing and treasure hunting. He who has more funding and has deeper pockets will be able to do more things and go into more distant lands and explore more incredible ruins and take the loot for themselves. And that has been the case with archaeology for 200 years now.
Sure, he who has the knowledge has the power.
Exactly. But the whole looting of the Baghdad Museum is obviously a very key moment in human history, and many people believe that the entire invasion of Baghdad and of Iraq actually had very little to do with anything we imagine, whether it's oil or whether it's Saddam Hussein, but had everything to do with the information and the valuable items that were kept in the Baghdad Museum that are direct links to ancient civilizations, our extraterrestrial technology, our links to ETs and many Stargate systems and structures and specific activator key components to activate Stargate technology and so forth. And as strange and as weird as this may sound to some people, let me tell you what, this is probably closer to the truth than anything else, because you can imagine imagine in Second World War Berlin or London when the bombs started falling. I think the last thing on people's minds was, hey honey, let's go down to the museum and take some cool stuff. There's a lot of cool stuff in the museum. Let's just go take it for ourselves. That's the last thing that will cross your mind. So the fact that the Baghdad Museum was completely looted and raided and virtually nothing left within 48 hours of the first bombs falling on Baghdad is a highly, highly suspicious bit of information.
Well, now you're going into another very interesting area. I've read some things by William Henry, and he's been talking for years about the potential existence of a Stargate underground in Iraq. Saddam Hussein is well known, this is documented fact, to have claimed that he was the reincarnated spirit of King Nebuchadnezzar, a well-known character from the Bible. And again, we're talking about Iraq, where all these ancient things have taken place from Babylon. Many things that we're talking about tonight, in addition to Africa, also a place where much turbulence is going on. I really wonder why, Michael, there's so much going on right now in that region, a place of great history, and I can't help but speculate if it has any connection with the completion of the Mayan calendar.
Everything that you mentioned is inextricably linked, and it's important to raise this and make people aware of it. Nothing we're doing today is separate from what the people in Southern Africa were doing 285,000 years ago. That is incidentally the date that I've come up with for the origins of this vanished civilization, around 285,000 years. There's a number of reasons why I say this. but I don't think we got enough time to go into that. But there are a number of scientific and geological evaluations that I've come up with, have found, that give me a deep sense of comfort to be able to say that. And all of that in South Africa and Southern Africa is directly linked to what we are doing today, how we're being manipulated, what our level of knowledge and information is, and how we are coming around to complete this weird full cycle that the Mayans have been talking about and predicting, the reaching of the conclusion of one age and the beginning of a new one. And this is spectacular information, because what we now know, and I'd like to talk to you a little bit about the measurements as well later that we have made in the stone structures in South Africa, so people know that I'm not just making this stuff up. We know that they were energy devices because we've measured it, and they're still active energy devices right now as we are speaking, giving us huge amounts of energy, far more so than the Baghdad batteries. And I need to just come back to that, Alex, very briefly. The Baghdad battery kind of technology is already the beginning of the post-Diluvian period, where the total control of the human race was already implemented through the hierarchical system and the feudal system that was introduced to the Sumerians by the high priests and the kings. As the Sumerian tablets tell us, when kingdom was lowered to earth from heaven, and priests and kings were appointed by the gods. And that's a very important point in human history, because it is at that point that the control and disinformation began. And we are now at the zenith and the apex of that control and disinformation. And therefore, we are finding people like you and I and millions of others that have reached the point of, sorry, I'm not going to believe that anymore. I need to find out the truth for myself. So the Baghdad battery is actually part of the disinformation, with the new era of so-called technology that was given to the humans. Prior to that, the technology was directly linked to free energy, the energy that exists freely around us everywhere and that makes up the entire universe. Remember, the first thing we get taught in science and physics is that energy cannot be destroyed. It just converts from one form to another, and the entire universe is one giant ball of energy. And so why are we paying for it? Because it was developed so that we have to pay for it, and we can be controlled through the supply of energy, which today we call electricity. Mm-hmm. But that is not what people like Ed Leeds-Kalnin, who built Coral Castle, used. It's not what John Keeley discovered with his musical Dynasphere in 1888. It's not what Nikola Tesla gave the world. They gave the world a different sort of energy, a free energy, which is many of them refer to as radiant energy. And that radiant energy is crucially and inextricably linked, once again, to these stone circles in South Africa, which are still giving us huge amounts of this radiant energy. It is visible and measurable in forms of electromagnetic waves, in sound frequencies, and in heat signatures. But there's another aspect to it that we are completely unfamiliar with, that we don't understand how these three aspects fit together. It's just spectacular. As you said, the Mayan calendar is coming to a close, or the predictions of this, the age mm-hmm. of this age that the Mayans predict will come to an end in 2012.
Certainly. And
the new age will begin. And what's happening is that our desperate quest for free energy is now taking us to these new areas of understanding that we are learning from the ancient civilizations in Southern Africa. This is spectacular.
And as you were talking, I was having a recollection of my interview with John Searle, and he created something called the SEG generator, and it's based on free energy. And in the interview, he said that the information came to him in a dream from an ET. People also theorized about Tesla perhaps tapped into the collective consciousness and coming up with these ideas, which is why many people, Mike, are optimistic about the future. even if there was some sort of a meltdown of the grid as it currently is today, the potential that this knowledge, even if there's no electricity and the internet is disrupted, but that the knowledge will still be out of the Pandora's box, if you will, and it will continue no matter what happens. But I just want to mention really briefly, we read some news recently about the largest solar flare in 5 years, and we've been reading more reports about solar activity. And there's a lot of interesting information about what that actually does to the human body, the impacts of it, and the planet, links to increased earthquakes and volcanic activity. NASA released a updated projection on what they think we're going to see out of sunspot cycle number 24 and 25. One of the things they said is that in this cycle, even C-class flares and M-class flares will do more to disrupt the grid. Charged particles coming into our atmosphere, having its effect on the Earth in a stronger way than sunspot cycle 23 due to a weakening magnetic field. And this is all timed with the Mayan calendar, not the end of the world, but a point of great significance where it appears to me that the planet is going to be bombarded with lots and lots of energy. And so this is a very, very interesting time, especially when we have mainstream admissions more and more every day that there is something going on out there that's changing. And despite the fact that NASA is involved in lots of cover-ups, there are other reports coming out about these stars they're finding and storms on Saturn and other planets warming up, in fact, over the course of the last several years. So it's an exciting time to be alive.
It truly is, and you know, it's important once again to look at all this information we have and try and make some sense out of it. What does it all mean? Well, what it's telling us is that it's giving us the clues to try and understand where we're moving to, where we're going as a species. But before we can figure out where we're going as a species, well, I think it's important to understand who we are, where we come from, and why we're here, because that'll give us a lot more answers. And it's only when you know the origins that you can then string a line between the origins and where we're going to extrapolate a line of that makes some sort of sense to see where we are going. I have a problem with people that just, you know, say, well, I don't care about where we come from. The time is here and now. We're just moving in this direction. This is what's going to be happening. If you don't understand the past, how could you possibly try and predict the future?
Well, Michael, this is the thing that people have the issue with. They're trying to understand why any other intelligence other than human would be interested in humans. This is and I'm sure you come across this as well. It's this perception that many people have that there's nothing of interest about humans. Why would they be interested in us? And there's lots of interesting ways that people look at the situation without considering other possibilities, because I'm pretty convinced that chickens, not to be insulting the chickens, don't fully understand humans and how we control them and how we keep them in cages and how we live off of them for food and how we're pumping them up full of drugs. I'm sure they're partially aware they're in some sort of a cage, but I don't think they fully cognitively understand the psychology of the Homo sapiens. So, Michael, I'm thinking that we perhaps are not in a state of consciousness to fully understand what is truly actually happening around us in the interdimensional reality that we're coexisting with.
Absolutely. Very well put, Alex. Well done on that. That's exactly what it is. And I always say, you know, if you're a farmer, you have a flock of sheep, and you don't want them to know what you do after hours, they will never find out because you're in control. It's as simple as that. And therefore, you know, we for so long have been in the dark because those that control us have not wanted us to find out. The one thing we have in our favor is consciousness. And I keep telling this more and more in my presentation, sharing this with people, that consciousness does not discriminate. It affects everybody equally. And because consciousness is some sort of a strange primordial field of the divine that we're trying to define and understand, it cannot be stopped by rubber clothing or rubber boots or putting yourself into a Faraday cage to insulate yourself from it. It permeates everything, everywhere, all times. And it is now visible and has been shown with some spectacular effect how the light, which the ancient civilizations called the Great Sun, the light from the galactic center, has been identified as a source of what could be called consciousness, or a source of life, unstoppable generation of life wherever it goes, and with that life comes consciousness. And the two are inextricably linked. It's as if the Holy Trinity of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit can now be explained with these things, with these three elements that we read in the first few chapters of the Bible. You know, the Word of God, God said, let there be light, so it's the sound, the light, and then this infinite field of consciousness, or the Holy Spirit, if you want to call it that. And in science and quantum physics, it can be referred to as the infinite quantum soup of possibility that manifests the physical world or projects the physical world we call the universe. And this is spectacular, because more and more of this information is allowing us to understand quantum physics and cross over and understand the fundamentals of spiritual religious beliefs. And all of this stuff is, again, once again, it can be directly linked to all the ancient cultures and civilizations and their belief systems, and how they use the knowledge of this stuff, these fields, all over their civilizations and whatever they were doing.
Now, I just want to say the word consciousness means different things to different people. I will say that one way to kind of experience this is to pay attention to the synchronicities when it comes to information. For myself, in different stages of my life, different pieces of information came at certain points when I was ready for it, or when I was ready to interview that guest, when it was time to go into that area. And so as I explore my own consciousness, I'm working to be very mindful moment to moment of those synchronicities. And there's many ways to describe the synchronicities that we experience. Sometimes it's being on Facebook, for example, seeing someone's face, and maybe a half hour later or a day later, they're saying, hey, how you doing? Haven't talked to you in a while. And I'm talking to more people, Michael, that are having this experience through the internet. Despite the fact that it's technology, many synchronicities seem to be happening through it. And this massive awakening through YouTube, despite the negative things going on, it's very exciting to see that reinforced over and over and over again, that there is a synchronicity out there. And as things, some people feel that time is speeding up or time is altering, that as that happens, our reality alters, or things seem to happen faster once the thought comes into manifestation.
Yeah, look, many physicists have spent a lot of valuable years showing that light, we believe that light travels at a constant speed. Well, that is no longer the case. There are many physicists that have shown that is not the case, that light travels at various speeds. It all depends on what dimension and what area of consciousness you are involved in, or you exist in. But this is fascinating stuff, because you mentioned the word time is speeding up. And one of the obsessions of great physicists have been this unified field theory and whatever that may mean, but the unified source from which everything comes, and how does it work, and the concept of space-time, three-dimensional space, and then time-space, three-dimensional time and one-dimensional space, how that line crosses over. Well, I think we're getting a lot closer to understanding that, or at least being in a position to be comfortable with that, because the concept of time-space is a very difficult concept for any human to try and comprehend. It is because it's so alien to us, because as far as we know, time is linear. Time starts with past, present, and future, right? What is fascinating about this, and I must also add that the work that I'm doing with Willem de Swart, the brilliant scientist Willem de Swart in Johannesburg, that we've been working on for the last 4 years now on what we call the secret numbers of God. I believe that we've decoded, and predominantly Willem, with his brilliant mind, has decoded how all this stuff works together, and we can now start to explain with basic geometry and sacred geometry which doesn't mean religious geometry, but fixed geometry, sacred meaning fixed in Greek, fixed geometry by the laws of nature, how this stuff actually works and why it works, and these numbers and the numbers behind the geometry show us very simply how this huge concept of what we call the numeric grid that makes up the universe, how it all works and fits together, and how it is totally and utterly encoded and cross-references. Everything is cross-referenced with numbers and numeric grids. It's spectacular. But what it's allowing us to do is also understanding this crossover between space-time and time-space. And it's a spectacular moment in history. What I think is really happening here is what the Mayans actually did very successfully is they tell us that time is speeding up and it will reach its apex point, maximum point in 2012, right? 21st December 2012. That's what they say. Obviously, there are other theories of when the date actually is, but let's stick to that for now, for argument's sake. Well, what happens when the time has speeded up, when it can no longer speed up anymore?
I just wanted to add in, Michael, that the solar maximum projection also continues past 2012 into 2013 and 2014. I just wanted to add that because there's a big focus that it's just 2012, and it's actually a cycle of time that we're going through, not a particular date, similar to describing the effects of a full moon, the waning and waxing of a full moon, as it is with this sunspot cycle.
Yeah. Well, what I just need to point out to you and your viewers is that once we reach 2012, if the Mayans were accurate in their predictions, which it seems more and more so to me, it's got nothing to do with doom and destruction. What it actually means is that we will reach a point in human evolution and human consciousness, our consciousness evolution, where we can come to terms with the concepts of crossing over from space-time into time-space, because of their prediction that time is speeding up and it'll reach the maximum at the specific date in 2012, which means past, present, and future will collapse into each other and they will coexist. Past, present, and future will coexist. And at that point, we consciously will be somehow more comfortable or more able to comprehend the concept of crossing over from space-time to time-space. And that's a crucial moment in human history, because that seems to be the ability of a lot of the advanced beings that are visiting us on this planet. They can travel through time, which to us is just a completely nonsensical ideology.
Okay, you mentioned evolution, and that's quite a bit different than revolution. Anthony Hilder has an interesting quote: "We have to have a revelation to avoid a revolution." My friend Leah Lewis from the website fearlove.com writes in her new book, Unzipping Reality. She'll be on the show soon. She talks about the difference between revolution and evolution. And as people seek a new system outside of what they call just simply a capitalistic system, which is a very, as you know, Michael, very narrow way to look at what's actually happening on planet Earth today. But as people seek a new system, some people are looking still in the old world: communism, socialism, collectivism that still falls under the umbrella of the elite. You talk about something, and we only have about 15 minutes left, contributionism. And I want to move into that area because you've been speaking for hours about this on a number of interviews. And it's not capitalism, it's not socialism, it's not anarchy. It's a different system that I'd like to get you to talk a little bit more about.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for bringing that up, Alex. And once again, my interest in this new system, which I call contributionism, comes from examining and researching the ancient vanished civilizations of Southern Africa, how they existed, what they did, and how they then metamorphosized or changed into what we are today and how we humans behave today. Because before the flood, I see the flood as a huge dividing line between a pre-Diluvian period, which is very, very strange and foreign to us today, and I deal with extensively in my presentation. And in my new upcoming book, The Lost City of Enki, I'll be expanding on that in various ways. But after the flood, we suddenly see the rise of all these various civilizations. We see the appearance of writing and Sumerian tablets, and suddenly these great, advanced civilizations appear all over the world, speaking different languages, being at odds with each other, and the great wars break out. And we realize that, as I mentioned to you before, I believe that that's actually where the manipulation began. And people do not understand the importance, or underestimate, should I say, the importance of the event of the Tower of Babel event, that moment. It was a critical moment in human history that has led to the division that we have experienced as a species. But so what I found is that you mentioned earlier the solar activity and whatever is going on in space. One giant solar flare and it'll fry all the satellites in space around us, and we'll go back to the dark ages within a few seconds. And what will that mean for us? It'll mean that unless you've got food and water, you will die. Simple. It doesn't matter how much money you got. I don't care how much gold you got. All the material possessions mean absolutely nothing. It's all about survival, and food and water is the number one. Shelter is the next thing. So what is going to happen to society and the human race if that happens? And the chances of that happening are very, very good. Listen to what Nassim Haramein has to say. The surface of a planet is not a good place to hang out. It's highly unstable, and unexpected things happen. Mass extinctions occur all the time.
Yes, and one thing
arrogance is our biggest enemy in this position at the moment.
One of the things that I've seen over the years, Michael, is this connection between the solar cycle, the maximum aspect of the solar cycle, which is 3 to 5 years. It varies, and cycles of wars, revolutions, and also changes in consciousness. We saw this during the late 60s. We saw this during the early 90s, solar maximum, 1990, 1991. And the bombing of Iraq at that time. 10, 11 years later, we saw the stage-managed event of 9/11, and it appears those that are in power place that event at a particular point on the solar cycle, when it's been described by many people that have looked at the solar cycles and its tied to human behavior as a time where human excitability is peaking, when there's more activity. But it also leads me to believe that we need to be very careful about what thoughts we're projecting at this time. When I see lots of things about the zombie apocalypse, I'm concerned that they're trying to create this fearful view of the reality that there's going to be zombies marching around, to inject that into the collective consciousness as some sort of a toxic injection. To distort reality and the future that actually is coming. And so I think that thoughts are very important at this time to look at.
And the manipulation is so subtle and so brilliant. People mustn't underestimate the constant, continuous, subtle indoctrination that we are exposed to through electromagnetic waves, through frequencies, through cell phone towers, cell phones that we use on a daily basis all the time. Television, the frequencies that those come through, radio, everything around us is pretty much structured to control and manipulate us. Now, I cannot stress that enough. If people that are unaware of this or that are new to this, will very quickly jump up and down and say, oh, you're just a conspiracy theorist, prove this, prove that. Well, you know what? We don't need to prove anything. Just open your mind, go and do some research, and you realize we are under absolute control. And one of the greatest expressions I've started using recently, it's an old expression, don't worry, sir, everything is under control. And that's exactly what it is. Everything is under control. But let us come back to this new system, because if we're going to have a meltdown, whether it's a solar flare that causes a meltdown, whether it's a financial meltdown, which I also believe is imminent, that the entire socio-economic climate melts down and breaks down because I don't believe it can sustain itself for very much longer.
Right. And
if the financial system melts down and just collapses, what are we going to do? It's very important for people to understand that money is not a natural process of evolution. Money was maliciously introduced by the royal political elite several thousand years ago as a tool of control, so they could control their subjects. So they introduced money. It was brought into the Sumerians by the Anunnaki, the gods, to introduce money into the system. So if there's a meltdown and money stops to exist, and the communication devices melt down and we go back to the Dark Ages, we need to have a system that we have at least thought about or embraced to be able to move ahead. Because what we can say with absolute certainty is when it does melt down, there'll be chaos on the streets. People kill each other for a loaf of bread. They'll kill each other for a glass of milk. They'll kill each other for a morsel of food. Now, that obviously cannot continue. That is not a sustainable model. Okay? We need to look at something that is a unified model which unites people for a united strength, a unified strength where everybody contributes towards the greater benefit of all. Mm-hmm. And that is really the foundation of what I call contributionism. A whole new social structure that operates without money, without barter, without trade, without any value attached to anything, where everybody in their community contributes towards the greater benefit of all. And what you will find, I know we don't have much time left, so just need to put this out to the people. This is not going back to the Stone Age or to the Dark Ages. In fact, it is completely the opposite. It removes the hurdle. It removes money from the system, and since money is the hurdle and the obstacle to all progress, you're removing the hurdle to all progress. And I'm talking from whether you're a farmer or a shoemaker or a rocket scientist or whether you're an engineer, you have no hurdles or obstacles to what you want to contribute or achieve, and your passion is. So we will leap rapidly forward into an enlightened spiritual age filled with conscious people that'll have huge amounts of time to pursue their spirituality, and the levels of consciousness will explode globally because people will have time to pursue the art and culture and spirituality, because they'll no longer be chasing money, or 90% of the time or more chasing money so they can pay rent, buy milk and bread and pay electricity. All of that stuff is out of the window. We don't have to worry about that.
And you know what? Now, and this is the irony right here, is that some people perceive, when they don't understand the full message of what we're saying, that we're doom and gloomers. But I'm right with you, Michael, in that if we have a meltdown of the grid caused by a solar flare, so many things would change overnight. There would be turbulence. There would be rapes taking place and people being robbed. There would be this major chaotic time period. But there's no, it doesn't mean it's going to stay like that forever. With all the information about what's possible already being out there, outside the Pandora's box, with those satellites, those weapons of war that are holding all these nations hostage, when that shifts, if there's any technology that's out there in space that has been put out there to tamper with our brainwaves, which is very possible. People should also look into the work of Nick Begich. If something like that happens that disrupts those technologies, we could see a major shift in consciousness. I've also seen studies that talks about solar flares, solar activity, and its ties to geomagnetic storms, and their ties to lucid dream states. And so I think as we progress further in the future, things get more exciting because there are so many unknown things that can happen. There are so many different turns we can take other than the zombie apocalypse end of the world script scenario that clearly they want us collectively focused on. Yeah.
Well, a world without money is the only way ahead. And I need people to go away and think about this. When you tell people you're going to remove money from the system, they just go, "Oh, well, how is it going to work? Who's going to pay for stuff, and who's going to supply and provide all this stuff?" This is how poisoned our minds have become. This is how conditioned we have become. And without money, we can't survive. No, that is not true. Without money, we're doomed to slavery forever.
You know,
we need to remove money from the system, and the control collapses. Whoever these people are that are controlling humanity, and that's a whole other debate, obviously. And whether they're human or extraterrestrial or a combination, the moment you remove money from the system, you take away their control. Mm-hmm. It falls flat, and people, human beings, take control and the power back in their own hands. Communities start to govern themselves. They provide for themselves with ease because you've got brilliant minds in each community that can do brilliant things overnight. We're already doing brilliant things. Nothing has to change. The technology and the developments and the products that we do today can continue as they are, but they will dramatically change. There's a whole paradigm shift in every aspect of life to the way that communities are structured, the way that education happens, how children are brought up in their communities that are now children of the entire community and not just children of a family, and how they are trained as they're growing up into whatever their natural passion is or their God-given talent is, so that then becomes what they end up contributing to the best of their ability, to the greatest benefit of all people in that community. And that is such a simple concept that it takes a while for some people to internalize this. But what I can also tell you, Alex, is that as alien and as utopian as it may sound to some people, it is actually a natural order of things. That's how things should be, because that is our natural extension of sacred geometry and the laws of nature. It's a continuation of the creative process that we as human beings are a physical extension of, or an example of. We're just an example of a creative process of sacred geometry and the laws of the divine nature. And we must continue that in what we do as human beings in our lives towards our community and the greater benefit of all in that community.
Michael, we only have you for about 4 more minutes. Can you briefly go over Stonehenge, because I don't believe that I asked you about that yet, and then I also want to get your take on Planet X and if you see anything significant in that direction.
Right. Very quickly, the Stonehenge is a very ancient site. I've recently discovered geological, physical evidence that shows us irrefutably, without any shadow of doubt, that Stonehenge is way more than 1 million years old. Anything else you hear from anybody else is just speculation. I have the physical evidence that shows, and I will share that with you on Friday night in Portland, that Stonehenge is way more than 1 million years old. The stones do not lie. The geology does not lie. This is a huge breakthrough and discovery, because it supports the belief that the history of our planet is a lot stranger and goes back many millions of years and not just a few thousand years and so forth. Obviously then we deal with the circles in South Africa and that civilization of humans that suddenly appeared around 285,000 years ago. I have some evidence and geological evidence and also written evidence about that from the Sumerian tablets. And then to talk about Planet X or Nibiru, it's fascinating because, there's Comet Elenin that is causing a lot of confusion, and it now seems there's a lot of evidence from a number of astronomers and amateur astronomer groups that have shown that Elenin is not a comet. It seems to be moving at will, and it's definitely a lot of evidence to show that it is an intelligently controlled entity or a craft or something of that to that extent. But it obviously has huge amounts of energy fields around it. So we'll have to see what happens if it does come into alignment the way that some of the predictions have been made in September. And then the Planet X or Nibiru. Several years ago, there was this red dwarf that they suddenly noticed, and they started writing about this red dwarf that was very close to our solar system, and it took everybody by surprise. They didn't know that it was there. It was not possible for it to be there. Well, some photographs of this red dwarf recently appeared on the internet. Those photographs very quickly disappeared, but they very clearly show a reddish, it's either a star, which would then be a red dwarf, with planets around it, and there seem to be 4 planets around it, or it is a giant planet with 4 moons around it.
Wow,
Okay,
there's a lot going on, Michael. They're also talking about vortices being discovered above the planet. I don't know if you've heard Kate Perry's E.T., but if you haven't checked it out yet, I recommend you do so. Have you heard of that song yet?
Yes, I have. It's phenomenal. I mean, the fact that she's putting that information in a song is fantastic, and well done to her.
Well, another day we'll have to have a conversation about that. Michael, I want to thank you for coming on. We got about a minute left. I want to leave the audience and you with this. There's actually a way some people can practice contributionism right here in the Pacific Northwest in the next several weeks. Between July 1st and the 8th, the Rainbow Family Gathering is coming to this area. Now, I know about the stigmas, about dirty hippies and this and that, and unfortunately, if someone is that close-minded, they're not going to get what we're trying to share with them. For those that are open-minded, email me at Alex_Ansary, and I will send you to the map to the location. So, Michael, it's kind of exciting to see the Rainbow Family Gathering for the first time in a long time, if ever, come this close to Portland.
That's very, very good news. And they must keep it up. People, share this information with everyone you know. Once they have heard it, they cannot unhear it. I always remind people of that.